Everybody, please get your mobile phones out, and please turn up the volume as loud as you can. You'll see why. And when you're done, please stick your phone into the air so I can see when the majority has actually done it. And I'd like to start with a couple of questions. I see a majority now has it. But for whom was reaching for their smartphone the very first thing they did this morning? Majority. And who, since leaving the house, has not been further than 1 meter away from his or her smartphone? We're pretty hooked, right? And who, there it goes. And who actually thinks this is a good idea? This is a good thing, being connected all the time? A bit less. A lot less. There's a few brave people, but it's really strange if you think about it, that we so often want to be doing different things than checking our smartphones, and still they keep sucking us in. And today, I want to show you that this is intentionally designed by Silicon Valley, and that this is a bad thing. These companies hack our attention, and with paying our attention, we quite literally do that. We pay attention, and we cannot afford to pay attention in the vast amounts that we do it now. This is not going to be a talk about how bad technology is. I love technology. I'm a journalist covering technology. I could not live without it. I could not envision working without it. Hey, this was even my profile picture at one point. But I do notice that my own device behavior is getting ever stranger and more compulsive. I installed an app to check how many hours a day I'm on this device, and it reaches up to 4 to 5 hours a day. I even regularly experience a phenomenon called phantom vibrations, where I feel it in my pocket when it's not even there. So hey, I'm Wouter, and I'm an addict. And by the time, probably you've heard a couple of sounds in the audience, and I'm not alone. I think I'm not the only one who is addicted. And sounds are not the only way that these companies get your attention. Probably by now it's a good idea if we switched our phones off again to have our full focus back on the stage again. But these sounds are not the only ways that these companies get our attention. There are many other ways as well. One of the things they do is the companies have figured out how our dopamine systems work. Dopamine, the happiness hormone, the stuff that we make when we have fun, when we make love, when we do all kinds of other things, and as it happens, also when we do things on our smartphones. And companies have figured out how our dopamine systems work and have learned how to use our smartphones as pocket-sized dopamine pumps to get us ever more hooked. And how do they do it? Well, let's give you an example. Humans have an inherent nature to create order, right? When you clean your room, when you tidy your desk, you make a nice little burst of dopamine. And these companies know this, so what do on your home screen? They disturb this order with push messages. So by the time you click the push message, you create order and you get a nice little rush of dopamine. And do you think it's a coincidence that these push messages are red, are naturally pre-programmed color of alarm, the color of blood? It's not a coincidence, it's been tested, and this is why they're this color. And this app right behind me, Snapchat, they play into all kinds of other psychological mechanisms. This is a function called Snap Streaks, which lets users know how many days in a row they've been snapping. Playing into our psychological need to create neat, orderly rows of numbers and to play games. And how about these mentions that you get in Facebook or Twitter? Do you think it's a coincidence that when you open the app, there's a slight lag between the time you open the app and you actually see the number of mentions that you have? It's a deliberate design feature, borrowing from slot machines, building suspense, creating this tension, and playing into the very same psychological weaknesses as slot machines do. And the clock in Netflix ticking down when you finish your episode. Also, that is a design feature borrowed from all kinds of other science to get our attention as good as they can. And why do these companies do this? Because we live in an attention economy where every second we spend on an app is an extra dollar or euro earned for its maker. The longer we spend on apps, the more data they can harvest, the more ads they can show us. And this leads to an ever-escalating arms race for our attention. And this leads to addiction manufacturing, the likes of which we have not seen since big tobacco. And what the tricky thing about attention is, because that's what they target, is that attention works quite differently from what many people may think. We only have one attention. We cannot multitask. Multitasking is a myth. Attention works like a flashlight, not like a disco ball. You can only shine your light and your beam of attention to one place at a time. And when you try to switch, that brings switching costs. And what do these costs consist of? Well, it actually makes us dumber. There's very interesting research by London University showing that if you do an IQ test while multitasking, that will get your score down by 15 points, which is the same effect as smoking weed. And the other tricky part with attention is that attention works like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. And the less you use it, the weaker it gets. And this leads to a very interesting fact, because it now becomes in the interest of the big companies like Google, like Facebook, to make our attention muscles as weak as they can, as weak as possible. Because when you're distracted, you're even easily distracted. It's a vicious cycle. If this sounds like a conspiracy theory, it really is not. These companies do this in plain sight. They are not even secretive about it. They openly and proudly hold conferences about this. They organize TED Talks about this. They publish books about this. This is actually a screenshot from a summit in Silicon Valley, which is a yearly event called the Habit Summit. Of course, they wouldn't call it the Addiction Summit because that would sound too harsh. But that's exactly what they are manufacturing at these summits. They're exchanging tricks. And you can see on the slide, they're talking about the nucleus accumbens, which is a part of the brain that triggers the dopamine releases. And where does this end? Well, I work in media, and I've seen media change quite badly over the last few years, where even serious media have succumbed to sending out push notifications, and not only for breaking news. I myself might have written some clickbaity headlines as well, although I've never had a scoop quite like this one before. But we see where this is headed, and we see what happens if also communicating presidential policy becomes part of this attention economy. And we've seen just this week with the investigation in the US Congress about Facebook and the US elections. What happens if our democracy becomes part of this attention economy? It's bad. It's a bad deal, and it's bad for civic society. So what to do? Well, there's good news too, because remember that attention works like a muscle. We can retrain it, and even the weakest muscles can be retrained to Men's Health cover material. So that's exactly what we should do. We should focus again, learn how to be attentive. And why not start by creating spaces for focus, like our bedroom. I've strictly banned screens from mine, and it's bliss. I can recommend it to anybody. We actually read, we actually talk, we actually sleep, and we actually do not reach for our smartphones the very first thing in the morning. And here's the smart part, there's really smart settings hidden inside your phone that you can use in your own benefit. There's a setting hidden that lets you put your screen to black and white to make your phone artificially boring. And at least those red push messages won't bother you anymore. Get rid of push notifications, turn them all off. Get rid of the most attention-grabbing apps. It's going to take some changing of behavior. It's going to take some experimentation. But from now on, I think it's really important that we start paying more attention to our attention. Thank you.